Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
A note for the listener. The stories that you hear at the beginning of each episode are either based on true events or are inspired by them. We cannot know exactly what was said during those events, but all conversations that you hear are plausible. Coming out only next Tuesday, and those lined up outside to be the first ones to purchase it will have to bear the cold and rainy weather for just a few more days. Then some other big C-lip news. Professional skateboarder and former MTV star Ryan Sheckler is getting married. He announced his engagement to Abigail Balloon on Instagram with photos of the proposal on a Texas ranch where the couple spent time together with family for Thanksgiving. You might remember Ryan from the reality TV show Life of Ryan, in which he lived a high life of alcohol, partying, and lots of sleeping around with pretty girls. But Ryan says that his life has changed once he gave his life back to Jesus, and he became a Christian. His fiancée Abigail is also a Christian. In an interview with Graham Bensinger for the show In Depth with Graham, Ryan admitted that they were not going to have sex before marriage, mentioning that it is so much better for them to wait until they say, "I do." Ryan, we wish you all the best. Now let's dial in another caller. This is
All rise for the bride.
Here she is, bro. Ryan's longtime friend and best man says. Yes, he thinks. There she is, his bride, dressed in white, pure and beautiful, saved for him. They did it. They saved sex for marriage. They saved that deep intimacy until they would say, "I do." And now they're about to say those precious words, to be forever united emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Here comes the bride, his bride.
Today we have gathered here together for the wedding of Ryan Sheckler and Abigail.
I am your host, Danique Tersmet, and you are listening to the Little Light Studios podcast, a show in which we seek to answer your most challenging Bible questions.
Ryan Sheckler started skateboarding at the age of 2 and quickly became obsessed with it. He was so good that he went pro at the age of 13 and kept winning competition after competition.
Let's bring the noise for Ryan Sheckler!
By the age of 17, MTV caught on and offered him his own reality TV show, and that's when his fame became truly widespread, with lots of teenage girls idolizing the young California skateboarder. Ryan soon found himself partying and drinking more and more, to the point where he became a full-blown alcoholic. It was in rehab that he started reading a daily devotional that his mother gave him called Letters from Jesus. He opened the book to that day's date, which was his first day in rehab, which said that he would never be alone. Jesus would never forsake him. It was right there and then that he gave his life back to Christ. This life as a newborn Christian also meant that he was determined to not have sex before marriage again. So, when he started dating his girlfriend, Abigail Balloon, that's exactly what he did. They waited, and it was the best decision they could have made. There's a lot of questions Christians have about sex, but the church is not always a safe place to ask those.
Often, sex is made seen as something mystical and forbidden, or a taboo, or we should all keep it hush-hush. Those who do ask questions are often shamed for it. In today's episode, I'm talking to Dr. Derek and Elma Marie Heltzinger. With him being a family and lifestyle medicine physician and her being a licensed therapist, they make quite the power couple, I should say. And they have a history of running marriage seminars and depression and anxiety recovery programs together and counseling young couples as they figure out the world of Christian dating. And obviously, they know quite a bit about the topic of sex, including why the Bible says that we should wait until we're married.
We are here today to talk about sex, which is a very, very sensitive issue. And we're going to talk about God's way of doing this right. And we just want to say that up front that very, very few people have actually done this perfectly. When Jesus was brought the lady who was caught in adultery, he said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." So God is the God of forgiveness, and He's the God of redemption, and He's the God of restoration. And so I just want to say here, particularly in this topic of sex, that we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And we are not here to uphold ourselves as perfect in any way, but to discuss openly this topic of sexuality according to the Scriptures. And mistakes of the past, we confess, and we put them under the blood of Christ. And this is about moving forward. So where do we go from here and move into God's way, which is the best way for us when it comes to this topic of sex?
Thank you so much, Dr. Derek, for that. It's definitely a topic that is complicated, that is difficult. And even when we talk about sex before marriage, a lot of people might not go all the way, as we so call it, sexual intercourse, but that there are still people who do, other things. And like you said, whatever people might have done, they are forgiven in Jesus Christ. But then to dive into I think the most asked question among Christians, why do they have to wait until marriage?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that question is just to start right off the bat is because God says so. If we read in the Song of Solomon in chapter 2 and verse 7, as well as in chapter 8 and verse 4, the Bible states there that we should not awake love until the time is right. And if we look in the book of Mark, and I just want to read that text for us here. It says there, Jesus says, "For this reason a man will leave his mother and his father and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. And so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate." So God is the one that instituted marriage, and He instituted sex in that setting, and therefore it is good for us to do things God's way and wait until that time before we go ahead and participate in this gift that God has given. I think that's the number one reason. The other reason is that Jesus says that when we even just think about these kind of things, we've already committed adultery. We don't just commit adultery when we actually go with a person. Jesus says even if you just think lustfully and lust after another woman, you've already committed adultery in your mind with her. And so I think that's another reason, because Jesus says that it's adultery. When it comes to sex is the most powerful release of dopamine into the human brain that any person can do on a repeatable basis.
I imagine more than eating chocolate.
More than eating chocolate, for sure. More than even cocaine and heroin and other drugs. And so the potential of addiction with this is very, very high. And therefore, God has given very strict rules as to how we need to practice this. And therefore, if we want to do it correctly, it's good for us to follow God's way.
So, Miss Elma, you had a thought, I think.
Yes. I want to use the analogy of a fire. Having a fire in your fireplace in your house is so warming, and it's a place where your family can gather around. It bonds the family together. However, if that fire is inside a metal brick fireplace, it is a very strict boundary for it. If that fire was to get out of that fireplace, it will burn your house down. And I believe that is why God, in his mercy, in his love, he has given this incredible gift. It's God's idea. Sex is God's idea. He created it. He gave it as an incredible gift to a married couple. However, it must stay within the boundaries that he has given it. And then it brings bonding. It brings warmth to the relationship. But if it is used outside of those boundaries, it brings destruction.
So you're a licensed therapist, mental health therapist. What happens to people psychologically if they're not married yet? And I also want to throw in this curveball. Some people might have committed for life in living together, but they're not married. So kind of like two questions in one. What happens psychologically? And then the second question being, well, what if people are committed for life?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I recall when I did my bachelor's degree in psychology, I was really astonished that in my psychology textbook, which was written from an evolutionary, totally secular point of view, no Christianity in the psychology at all, it stated there that the more sexual partners a person has had, the more it decreases their capacity for a sexual relationship of intimacy in its fullness. And I believe that is many times why people will keep going from partner to partner, thinking, well, this person didn't have it, maybe the next person will have it. And yet the more sexual partners we have, the less our capacity is to experience a deep relationship of intimacy that is physical, emotional, mental, and I believe spiritual as well.
Yeah, I think also with if you follow the research and see what happens with people that have had multiple sex partners before they get married or commit for a longer relationship, their chances of divorce is much, much higher. And they all tend to fail in their marriages later on. And the correlation, there's a direct correlation between the number of sex partners that you've had to the risk of divorce. So the higher the number, the higher the risk of divorce.
Well, we know that redemption is possible with Jesus, right?
Absolutely.
So we won't say all, but it increases our risk.
Yes.
And the longevity, the chances of having a forever marriage is increased when we save ourselves as God has asked us to.
Yeah, well, there's repentance and there's confession and there's God that heals and that can take a broken vessel and fix it. And so there's always that aspect. But we're talking in general where people don't care and they just live their lives. Then these things spells disaster in the long run.
And the research has also shown that the fewer sexual partners we have is connected with greater happiness in the marriage.
Yes.
So people are much happier, they're much more content in their marriages when this has been their only or, just very few sexual partners in their life.
Yeah, and the last thing that I just want to throw in here with regards to that question is the risk of sexually transmitted diseases.
Right.
Obviously,
Yeah.
This is we live in a time where there's lots of medications and things available, so people think that this is not such a big problem anymore. But the majority of these diseases that can be contracted, herpes, HIV, and HPV, and sexually venereal warts, and all these kind of things are all viruses for which we really do not have any effective treatment. So when somebody contracts some of these illnesses and these diseases, they have it for life. And so when you then get married to somebody down the line, you're going to have to tell the person, I've got the bug. And that person needs to make that decision whether they're going to or want to, go ahead and live in this relationship, because if you're going to be exposed to this over the long run, you will eventually contract it as well. So these are all factors that you need to take into consideration before you go out and just play the field and have sex with anyone that you want to before you get married.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like God just really put up this boundary, like you guys said, that he made it that even as you said, Miss Elma, how people responded psychologically, I think it's because we're steering away from God's plan, and he knows what's best, and he knows what we need, and that saving it for marriage is the most beautiful thing.
Right, and I want to just add that when you buy a new car, you're going to read the owner's manual. And you're going to only want to put in the gas tank what the car says. If they say you're going to put 97 in this gas tank, you're going to put 97 in it.
Not diesel.
Right? And you're going to put the right oil in. You're not going to pour Coca-Cola down the oil tank or something. And in the same way, God created us. He designed us. And he knows what is going to be best for each of us. And I just want to say that our goal in marriage, and I really am very grateful to God. God has blessed Dr. Derek and myself, that we are spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically one flesh union. And I believe that is the goal for all of us in a marriage. It's not just physical intimacy. That is like one-dimensional sex. But when you have emotional intimacy and that commitment, the deep commitment, you have the mental intimacy, you have the social intimacy, and you have spiritual intimacy together. It just makes a 5-dimensional sexual experience instead of a 1-dimensional experience. And I believe that is what God designed for us.
So let's say that there's a couple, they're a Christian, and they've waited. They now can experience what you said, 5-dimensional sex instead of 1-dimensional. It's a man and it's a woman. They're different people. They're wired differently, emotionally, physically. How does the woman and how does the man in appropriate sex within marriage experience sex differently?
Well, God, in his infinite wisdom, in his design, he has made that men and women experience sex completely differently. Women are like crock pots and men are like microwaves, according to Gary Smalley. And so for a woman, she needs sexual intimacy, or what can I say, relationship, emotional intimacy from the time she wakes up in the morning. To have words of affirmation and loving touches and staying in connection. If her husband goes to work, to just call her and text her, hey, I'm thinking about you today. And the tenderness and the loving relationship, that is what really is very, I would say, prepares the woman to make love to her husband that evening. Whereas a husband may not, just totally different. They may not be in touch with their wives at all. And that evening when they come home, okay, it can be a certain time, okay, this is it. But a woman functions completely differently. And God has made it, I believe it, that God has made men and women differently like that because it is only through unselfishly giving to the other person, loving them, meeting their emotional needs, that our own emotional needs will be met. And so a truly satisfying marriage is all about selfless giving.
Anything to add to that, Dr. Derek?
No, I think this is probably the one area where people misunderstand and therefore they just don't connect. And unless they sit down and understand that men and women are different from molecular level to all other levels, and certainly culminating in the sex act, that we all experience it in a totally different way, and it's about giving rather than about receiving. But the Bible tells us that the more we give, the more we receive. And so that's the secret, I think.
There's a saying that says that men give love in order to receive sex, and women give sex in order to receive love. And that is a very simplistic way of stating it, but there is truth to that. And so that's why when there are premarital or extramarital sexual relationships going on, the woman really is the loser in that relationship, that she is not receiving her emotional needs being met.
Yeah, because in that case, the man almost always receives what he's looking for, and the women are the ones that are on the short end.
So she might constantly be giving herself sexually.
Yes.
And the man's like, well, I'm being fulfilled. And the woman's like, I'm not. So because like you said, Miss Elma, the woman wants to be cherished and loved throughout the day, like you said, with kind words and feeling noticed, feeling like she exists and feeling like she matters to that her husband. And I guess if she would just give sex to him and he is fine with that, then it's almost like selling yourself in some way.
Well, really, both parties are selling themselves short of God's great ideal and his incredible gift that he has for them. Because I want to say, whether it's pornography with masturbation, whether it is extramarital or premarital sex, it is one-dimensional sexual experience, and it will never be as satisfying as a 5-dimensional, where it is physical, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, and social as well. It will never have the depth of intimacy and meet our true needs for intimacy.
So is it true that men want sex more than women? And I'll add a question to that men are more easily sexually aroused than women?
Well, when you just look at the biology and the way men and women are wired differently, yes, in general, men tend to be more, the parties that desires and want sex more. And I think it has to do with the hormones, obviously, to begin with. In men, a man, the testosterone levels are much, much higher, and the testosterone is the hormone that drives the libido, the desire to want to have sex. But this is not a hard and fast rule. This is not to say that all men are the same, or that women do not have a desire and that they don't have a higher drive. There's a lot of variation even within the same sexes. But and also you have to look at it. There's different stages that a person goes through in your life. So when you just got married, yes, there's a higher need and a higher drive for sex, particularly from the guy's point of view. And so they will want to have sex more. But then children comes along and things change. Responsibilities comes into play. There's jobs and those type of things that all come in. And so all those things change these things. And then during a time when the woman wants to have children, her sex drive will be much higher during that time as well, because she wants to be pregnant and she wants to have a baby. And so all those things vary with time. And then once the kids leave the nest and you're by yourself, then you have more time. You don't have the responsibilities. There's no other kids and people around that you have to be taking into account. So all those things are things that changes the need and the want for sex. I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, I want to say that I think there are phases in the marriage, that sometimes it will be the wife's sex drive that will be higher, sometimes the husband. But in general, from the people that I've talked to, clients in my counseling practice, as well as, just people that I've talked to on a very personal level, it is, generally speaking, the men that are the pursuers and are the initiators, and that are more wanting sex more frequently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it reminds me of a joke that Gary Smalley tells at one of the seminars that we attended, where they looked at what is it in the relationship that turns men on and what is it that turns women on. And so they asked the women, and the women said, if the guy comes in and he unpacks the dishwasher and he helps with the kids and he does the laundry and he helps in the housework and he does those kind of things, that's what turns a woman on, kind words and the things that he says to her. And that's great. And they turn to the guys and they ask the guys, what is it that turned them on? And they say, any movement in the house. So you don't really have to do anything. Men are truly like microwaves, and women like crockpots. They take a long time to warm up, and so you need to take a little bit more work at that.
Dr. Laura Schlesinger, she has a very funny joke regarding that. Just if a man comes home from work and his wife was to meet him at the door and kind of like just, drop her clothes off and say, "Hey, I'm ready for you." the husband was like, "Yes, this is amazing. This is awesome." If a wife was to come home from work and her husband was to just like stand at the door and just say, take his clothes off and say, "I'm ready for you," the woman would go like, "You pervert, what's wrong with you?"
Yeah, that's how it is.
I think that illustrates
that is so funny. I've never really thought of it that way. I mean, like, as that the woman is like, it attracts the woman when the man does. Maybe the woman just wants the man to speak her love language or something like that. So that's very different.
She would like to be met at the door with some flowers and him put his arm around her and say, "Hey, honey, let's
have
go
a
for
nice
a walk.
dinner ready.
Let's go for a walk into the sunset."
Let's talk.
Yes, have a candlelit dinner ready. No, yeah, that's really interesting. It's so different, and that's I think that was a good question to ask, because I've met some people who are like, no, men and women are not wired differently. I'm like, really? I don't know about that, because I mean, Dr. Derek, maybe you can answer this question, but in my mind, from what I understand, is that women are struggling every single day with temptation. Is that correct? And that women are not, because I don't really go around thinking, oh, I need to fight off all this temptation with all these men around me that I can see. Like, I just go through life being fine.
The media and our society at large have tapped into this drive that God has placed in men. And I think Prager University just recently actually put a very, very excellent short little video out on PragerU explaining this. The advertising industry and the media uses sexuality and sensuality to draw attention to their ads, because they know that sex sells, and we know that. That's why you use a sexy woman with sexy legs shifting a gears in the car while they're selling the vehicle, because they know more people will look at that and the men will be attracted to that and therefore will be more likely to buy the vehicle. That is from soap to selling toothbrushes to toothpaste, you name it. Since when is toothpaste sexy?
Yeah.
So, but they will make it into that because they use that drive that God has placed there. And so because of that, we are tempted all the time, all around us. It's on billboards, it's on television, it's an advertisement, it's in magazines. I mean, you can hardly walk out the checkout counter nowadays without experiencing something on magazine covers. I mean, everything is about, how to have better sex, how to do it better, how to be the best lover, how to have a better orgasm. I mean, you can name it, and it's everywhere. And so, yes, these things are temptations. But what we do with those temptations, is between where the Christian comes in is that you need to take those temptations out and don't think about it. Don't take a second look. Don't look at these articles. Don't play around with these thoughts in your mind, because that's where the trouble comes.
So, okay, going back to the concept of not temptations or things outside of marriage, but within marriage, is it a thing that married couples can have sex too often, or maybe even too little? I can imagine too little, but is too often a thing?
Well, the first thing that I would like to address in that area is the emotional needs of a man and a woman, which I think there's a lot of people who do not understand that the emotional needs of a man and the emotional needs of a woman are completely different.
So what are they? What are the emotional needs of a man and a woman?
The emotional needs of a woman, top 5 emotional needs, are for affection, physical touch and affection, non-sexual touching, physical touch and affection. But I want to say, as a married woman, with your husband, you say it's non-sexual, but actually it is sexual, because when he is loving and tender and touching you in a non-sexual way, it really is something that is preparing you to make love to your husband that night, okay? So it's physical touch and affection, meaningful conversation, honesty, feeling that you can trust this person, financial support, and family commitment. And then men's top 5 needs, emotional needs. The first one is for sex. And many women think, oh, my husband's sex drive is so high, blah, blah, blah. Actually, when a man wants to make love to his wife, he wants to feel bonded with her. And for a man to be in a marriage where there's very little sexual intimacy is like a woman being married in a marriage where her husband is not talking to her.
Yeah, and a lot of women do not understand that point, and therefore they judge the guy as just wanting to get a physical sexual release, and so because it's driven by his testosterone levels, and so it's just met on as a biological drive, but it's much more than that. It's actually an emotional need because a man feels bonded to his wife through sexual activity. It's
More
not
so-
just the drive.
More so than women?
No, I think women experience the same way.
Okay.
I think women experience the same way, but particularly because in men, the sex drive is the number one
Gotcha.
emotional need. People judges it as, this guy just has this high sex drive. He just wants to have this biological release, but it's not just that. And I think most women do not understand that.
I believe that the woman feels bonded with her husband through intimate conversation, through meaningful conversation, through them touching each other a lot, feeling that connection, feeling protected by him. That's how she feels bonded, primarily also through sexual intimacy, but primarily through the love and the tenderness and the words and the intimacy, the meaningful conversation. Whereas the man, he feels bonded primarily with his wife through sexual intimacy. And then other top emotional needs for a man is also for recreational companionship, for having an attractive spouse, for domestic support, and for admiration and respect.
Domestic support meaning cleaning the house, cooking, those kind of things.
Right, just
Yes.
supporting him at home,
Yeah. And then if people are in a relationship / engaged, I imagine that a man, because he can't really have sex with his girlfriend, fiance, that then physical touch, appropriate physical touch is very important, I'm guessing.
Right, but you're talking now about engagement, and that's fine. But if a person is not married, a person needs to be very careful with physical touch. Just because, holding hands and just putting your arm around someone's shoulder, that's great, but a person must be very careful.
Yeah.
Like it says in Song of Solomon, do not awaken love until the time is right. So we need to be very careful because our sexual desires and our passions can be very strong. And if we put ourselves in a situation with someone that we're very in love with and that we have committed to already, maybe by promising an engagement already, if we put ourselves in a situation where we are private and alone, things can happen that we really do not want to go there. It is best to date by having picnics, being outside, being in public spaces, even though you can be alone in a public space. But be very careful not to put ourselves in situations where things can happen that we do not want to overstep that boundary before marriage. That Dr. James Dobson talks about the 12 steps towards sexual intimacy. And that starts when a couple meet each other. It's first eye to body, then eye to eye, then hand to hand, then hand to shoulder, then hand to waist. You can see how it becomes more progressive. And I believe then it's face to face, which includes kissing, then hand to body. And from then on, that's up to where it should be before marriage, nothing further before marriage. And then after marriage, it's, touching each other in private places and, the breasts and the private parts and oral sex as well as sexual intimacy.
So I'm hearing, obviously, that you need to set a lot of boundaries. So speaking of boundaries, within marriage, I don't think that some people know this or understand this, but within marriage, in all kinds of circumstances, there are still boundaries, right? The opportunity to say no to things. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I mean, boundaries is a huge topic, and it's something that very few people actually pay a lot of attention to, unfortunately. And people just go with the flow and what everybody is doing, what the crowd is doing, and so they don't realize how dangerous these things are when you don't have high boundaries, particularly when somebody else outside of the marriage begins to meet emotional needs that's supposed to be met by your spouse. And so when you don't have good boundaries, you open yourself up to that, where you allow strangers to meet your emotional needs that was supposed to be met by your spouse, and that can lead to all kinds of problems. But there are health boundaries. You know, when we're talking here now specifically about sex and within the marriage. So certainly there are health boundaries, you know, that we need to keep in place. You know,
Sorry, can I just pause on
yes,
the thought that
absolutely.
you just expressed there? Because I think that that's very profound and it needs to be enlarged on. So talking about the emotional needs of a man and emotional needs of a woman, if we allow someone else, if I allow another man time alone with intimate conversation, I am opening the door where the devil can bring feelings and thoughts and, you know, possible attraction between me and that other person. If I allow another man to meet my need for intimate conversation, for meaningful conversation,
Yes.
and personal compliments and things like that, let alone physical touch and affection, touching another person of the opposite sex, you know, that is overstepping a boundary. That
Yes.
is something that only their spouse should be meeting their emotional need for physical touch and affection. I've seen it in the church where people are touching another person's husband, another person's wife, another person's boyfriend or girlfriend. It's overstepping a boundary. It's giving the devil a foothold because there is something magic about touching a person of the opposite sex that you're not married to for the very first time. There is some feelings and thrills that go along with it. And it is wrong. It is inappropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up because all of that stuff leads to, for a woman in particular, to sexual intercourse, because that's what her husband is supposed to do within the marriage to meet her emotional needs. And so those things, and this is something, you know, that is not practiced. There's inappropriate hugging that goes on where people don't do a one-armed hug or a
side
proper
hug.
side hug or an A-frame hug where people, you know, really hug each other very closely and people of the opposite sex are holding each other tightly, which I think is completely inappropriate. And so those are some of the things, certainly boundaries that you need to put in place. But then also other boundaries certainly that comes from this one is the exclusivity that goes with this, is that these kind of needs should only be met by somebody that you are married to, not by a stranger and other people. And so therefore...
Or a family member.
Or even
Sometimes
a family
it's
member.
a brother-in-law or sister-in-law.
Yeah, even a family member, And so those are things that we need to keep in place. And so that also brings to no pornography. So there are many counselors that are prescribing pornography to spice up a relationship.
That's insane.
And stuff. It's totally insane.
You might as well just have a threesome then, because that's the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And so this is like bringing another person into your relationship that is going to fulfill or meet some of those needs. And people are fantasizing about other people while making love to their spouse, and those things are not good.
Jesus said, if you lust after a woman, even in your mind, you have committed adultery with her in your heart. So it's very important for our marriage to be exclusive, that it's a sacred place where only the two of you are.
Yeah.
That no third person, no pictures of other people, nobody else enters that sacred space.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is also protecting your spouse's reputation, not running around and telling nasty things about your spouse. You know, if you need counsel and you're in a problem-solving conversation with someone that you have especially asked to help you with a problem in the relationship or a problem in the marriage, that's entirely different. But talking badly about our spouse just to our friends, our mothers and fathers, our family, whatever, that also is an inappropriate boundary.
Absolutely.
And I just want to talk about as well that a man's sexual need, sometimes I want to say, even whether it's at work or people of the opposite sex, sometimes will make jokes bordering on little sexual innuendos and sexual jokes. That is wrong with somebody of the opposite sex. I would say it's wrong, period. But it is wrong making jokes like that with someone of the opposite sex.
Absolutely.
And a man needs to also be very careful that he doesn't allow any other person to meet his needs for visual and his sexual needs.
But also admiration. You see,
Yeah,
when you're
that's right.
you're the kingpin at work, and you're the funny guy, and you're the one that tells the jokes, and everybody likes you, and everybody admires you, other women. That is one of the top 5 needs of a man.
Right.
Is admiration, and so those are things that should not be met by strangers, but should be met by your wife.
Yeah, like for me, I try purposefully to show a lot of admiration to my boyfriend, but as you're saying, I don't do that with other men. I'm not going to go out and be like we both like rock climbing, and I say like, wow, you did so good in that route, or like early today we did a belay class, a top rope belay class. And he was climbing, and I genuinely was admiring him. I was like, wow, he's really strong on the boulders, bouldering. And I said to him like, well, you're a really good climber. And he just lit up. And so it was genuine. I meant it, but I would never say that to somebody else. I'm not going to say like, wow, you're amazing. Like that, like you said, that does something to a man, and it's inappropriate if it's someone else's partner.
Right. So personal compliments, making personal compliments to someone of the opposite sex is meeting an emotional need. And that is inappropriate if you're not in relationship or married to that person. Yeah. And what I want to say, what that includes for men as well, is a need for respect. That respect is extremely important for men. If they have to choose between being loved or being respected, they would choose respect, even though they need both, right? And so for me as a wife, it has always been a very high priority that my husband's opinion at home is respected, that his position as the father, as the husband in the family, and that he feels respected, even if he makes a mistake from time to time. Everybody makes mistakes. That doesn't mean that we don't respect him. I want to say that we should respect the position of the president of our country, regardless of who the president is, or whether we like the president or not. In the same way, we respect the husband and the father in the family, regardless of if he makes mistakes sometimes. We respect his position. However, trust is earned. And that is the work of myself as a wife and my husband to earn the trust of his family.
So going back to boundaries, we've talked a lot about keeping other people out, but I'd imagine that there's also boundaries between the spouse between the two spouses, the husband and the wife, especially saying no to sex. What's the balance in that? What are boundaries between two spouses when it comes to sex? And also, can a person say no? And when do you say yes because the other person really wants it?
Well, yes, absolutely, that a person can say no at times. Sometimes you are truly exhausted. Sometimes you are truly not feeling well. And yes, that a husband or a wife whose spouse says, I'm really sorry, but I just cannot make love tonight, but how about tomorrow night? Can we plan this date for tomorrow night? However, I think we need to remember that it is very painful. It hurts to be turned down when you make an overture to your spouse. And, I want to say at least 4 out of 5 times, give your husband a yes instead of 4 out of 5 times a no and 1 time a yes. Let's do our utmost to be as positive and as willing as possible. However, the husband at all times needs to respect his wife. And if she says, I am truly exhausted, I'm really not feeling well, then absolutely he needs to respect her as his wife. I just want to address also the thing of how frequently should a person make love. And the Bible is silent on that. I do think that it's a personal thing between the couple, and mutual consent is very, very important. That no party in the marriage should feel forced, feel pushed, should feel pressured to do things that they feel uncomfortable with or against their conscience. And but I do think that a wife should remember that when her husband makes an overture to her to want to make love, that she needs to reframe, not just think, what's wrong with this man? He wants to have sex again. No, reframe it and say, my husband wants to be bonded with me. He wants to feel close to me. And this is his way of bonding with me. I want to be bonded with my husband.
This is a topic that gets a lot of attention, especially amongst more conservative Christians. Somehow people believe that this is an area that we need to have, incredible self-control even within marriage. I think God makes it very clear in the Scripture that self-control is about predominantly having desires for other people outside of the marriage, premarital sex, lusting after other women, that's not your wife, prostitutes, and those kind of things.
Putting everything else aside, forsaking all others.
Yes, that's what it says in the marriage vows.
Forsake all others, nobody else enters.
And so that is true. But God also says in the book Song of Solomon that God has given sex for pleasure. We need to delight in each other. And he also says there, be intoxicated with your wife's love. Let her breast satisfy you at all times. Now, just from a logical point of view, if you ask the question, what does intoxication mean? Intoxication means that I've had too much of something, right? You don't become intoxicated by having one drink a day, all right? You become intoxicated if you take too much, all right? So when the Bible and God tells me, be intoxicated with my wife's love, and let her breast satisfy you at all time. To me, that is telling, God doesn't tell me, hey, I want to let you know you can only do this once a week or once a month or twice a month. He's saying enjoy by mutual consent as much as you guys want, because I am the giver of this gift and I have given it to you. Enjoy. And I think that's what God is telling us here. And if people decide within the marriage, yes, there are times when you have children and when you have jobs and things where you both work and you're tired and you don't get to all these things. You may desire it, but it just doesn't happen. That's fine. And respect each other's situations and respect the other person saying no, but let's strive to create times where we make special time for that, just like we make special time for exercise, we make special time for a good meal, we make special time for whatever we do in life, that if we value those things. So let's make special time to make love.
And I think that is an important point, because people who have affairs, they schedule a time and a place where to meet. And I heard a research study. It was on a CD that I was listening to, where they took real affairs that people had and they gave it to couples whose marriages were so dead that those people were calling each other names, and there was like two couples that just turned out of the study because they said the other person isn't worth it. But they took these couples, and all they had them do every week, they gave them an affair that real people had, and they made them go have an affair with each other.
What? This is part of the study?
Yes.
Married couples.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Who have an affair between the husband and the wife with each other. You
Okay, so
understand?
technically they're not having a
No, they made them do the things that the people who had affairs did.
Gotcha.
Yes, they took the event, the things the person did, like, go to such and such restaurant and then go for a walk on the beach afterwards. They took those type of things and gave it to married couples. They gave them one a week that they had to do. People whose marriages were so dead that they were almost at the point of divorce.
Wow.
And it turned those married couples' marriages around by I want to say in quotation marks, having an affair with each other.
Which really is just spending time together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
having
Having
a
conversation.
date. That's what it was, having a date. So we've always been a very firm believer of having a date every week, making special romantic time to be with each other. And we believe actually like every 3 months, take a weekend, time out that is just for the two of you. Take 1 week a year, if possible. If you're able to, do the same for another couple's children, take their children for a week, and then they take your children for a week. But it is very important to make that romantic time together, and also to schedule making love. Couples that have affairs, not couples that have affairs, people who have extramarital affairs, they will schedule a time and a place to meet the person that they are, and they will spend money on that. So why don't we do that in our marriage? Yeah. Spend money on having a date. Spend money on having a nice vacation together every year.
Those are the things that we're talking about here.
Yes, those are things we're talking about, making time for each other, and also even scheduling time in your schedule. Make a date to make love. Have that time set aside.
Yeah, it seems like if people would just do this, then a lot of marriages would be saved. Because I've never really thought of it that way. Like, someone who's cheating on their spouse sets the time apart to spend time with that person. And on top of that, they dress up. They make sure they look nice, that they smell nice, that they're dressed nicely. So if we would just do that for a partner, a spouse, then the chance of cheating is much more slim. Right.
Well, Willard Harley, in his book, His Needs, Her Needs, he calls it to affair-proof your marriage by having an affair with your spouse. So do it to your spouse before somebody else does it. Right. And take your spouse away, and your marriage ends in a divorce. Put the time, put the effort, put the energy, put the money.
Get a nice hotel room.
Do what you need to do. Yes.
So speaking of affairs, cheating, all of those things, we touched on it a little bit before, but pornography. Jesus said in the Bible that if you look at another woman, lust after another woman, it's like you've already committed adultery, which is exactly what pornography is. So how does someone watching pornography, could be the man or the woman, affect a marriage?
Well, I think pornography is probably one of the major problems in our world today. When you go onto the internet and you look at how many hits every day takes place, there's literally millions and millions of hits every day. I believe a third of all hits every day on all the websites in the world is on pornography websites.
That's insane.
And it's totally insane. I mean, we're talking here about, $100 billion industry, if it's not more than that now. And so we know that these things are a major problem. But let's go back, because I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to dopamine hits, sex is the highest dopamine hit that a human can experience on a repeatable basis. And so because of that, the whenever you have high dopamine hits, it's a super stimulus for the brain, which has a high potential for addiction. And that is what pornography is. Pornography is a supernatural overstimulation. And now we have this on the internet where people have it available 24/7. You can watch this on movies, you can watch it on TV, you can watch it on your own cell phone, on your computer, on your iPad, wherever you are, it's always available. It's like music. You see, whenever you feel down, whenever you need comfort, whenever you are stressed, whenever you are depressed, wherever you are anxious, wherever you are, you have access to this.
And I just want to add to that also a lot of, romantic novels. and romantic movies. I'm talking specifically about the famous Nicholas Sparks movies. Message in a Bottle is one of them. What is that really popular one? I think it's like The Lucky One. Anyway, so there's a lot of those kind of movies where you feel connected to the actor because they're having a connection and you yourself want that connection. Yeah. And that's like almost like a sort of soft pornography for women, in my opinion.
Yes. Women bond more with a relationship aspect. And so for a woman to watch a very romantic movie and then it has some sex scenes in it as well, I mean, that's all lustful in her mind. And I believe that we as women are guilty. I mean, you know, that's why I say we've all fallen short of the glory of God, because I don't think there's a single person on this earth who can say, I've never thought a lustful thought. Yeah. But movies with sex scenes in them, especially when we identify with the actor, you know, one of the actors, and then it goes into this romantic relationship and the sex scene, we are guilty.
Well, the other thing is that God calls it adultery. And no matter who you are, when you talk to people that are engaged in these things, you never find somebody being proud that this is what they're doing. It always brings a sense of shame and guilt.
You're talking now about pornography with masturbation.
We're talking about that. Well, you know, these things are very closely related to masturbation because there is no pornography watching without a masturbation. Okay, it always goes together. Okay. And so, because it's a super stimulus and overstimulus, you can't watch those things and not desire and do masturbation. And so these things are usually goes together. And so the other thing is because it is such a powerful stimulus, there's always whenever you take something that is a powerful stimulus, you develop a tolerance. And so if you take a drug, the first drug you take gives you this high, and then the more you use it, the less effective it becomes because you over and super stimulate the brain. And so you down-regulate receptors in your brain that brings about a less of an effect each time you use it. So in order to have the same experience, you need to increase the dose. And so what it does for drugs is people begin to use more drugs and stronger drugs and things like that. But what happens when you do it with sex? With sex is you begin to move into perversions because now the regular sex is no longer stimulating enough. And so now you need to do something else that's going to give you the same kind of high and the same kind of dopamine deposit in your brain. And so this takes you down a path that leads to destruction.
Now, instead of one woman, now you're watching two women.
And then it's group sex, and then it goes into animals, and it goes to sadomasochism, rough sex
and violence, and BDSM.
Sex. Yeah, and so all kinds of things like that begins to play a role. And so then it becomes destructive. Because what it does then is that it literally begins to rewire your brain. You can actually get neuroplasticity that takes place. Your brain begins to be rewired and you become mentally sick.
That's really scary.
It's scary. It's scary.
Yes. And I've heard that also people who start, not everyone, but people who watch pornography, I don't know if it's often, but let's say people who watch pornography, it can lead eventually, if they go down that road that you just mentioned, to pedophilia. Is that correct? Are there studies done on that?
Not everybody goes down the road. You know, not everybody who does these things are going to become a Ted Bundy who kills 50 people and women. Not everybody goes down that road. But you don't know who you are and where your weaknesses and strengths lie when it comes to that. And so some people become murderers and serial killers. Some people become women abusers. Some people end up in pedophilia. Some people get into other perversions that leads them down a different place.
I just watched an excellent documentary called Raised on Porn. And it was a testimony of two men who were willing to be open and to share their experience. And the one man, he did go from, watching porn to, bondage and sadomasochism, that kind of stuff. And then he went over into pedophilia and he got arrested and he had to spend 5 years in jail. But the thing that was really, and the other man, what happened to him is that he so badly started wanting to act out some of the things he was watching in porn that he went and cheated on his wife and almost lost his family, his wife and children.
Through divorce, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
almost. But by God's grace, they were able to make it and pull it through. But the thing that really struck me most was that both these men said that it was a progressive thing. It was, firstly, the thing they said, like they were constantly seeking something new, stimulus, because it would get boring, because it's one-dimensional sex, you see.
Yes.
In a married relationship, you have 5-dimensional sex. When you have one-dimensional sex, it's going to get boring very quickly.
Okay, well, the one thing that I just would like to add to that is the fact that the availability of these things is a major problem, because when it's worse for somebody to be addicted to pornography than it is for somebody who lives a promiscuous life, because in real life you can only have sex with so many women, and at least it's with real people. And so, yes, that is bad, and that's going to mess you up as well. But the potential of being totally messed up mentally wise and emotionally wise through pornography is so much more, because this is stuff that you can do all the time, 24/7. There's people that spend hours and hours a day on various pornography sites where they expose themselves to all these perversions and all these things, super stimuli all the time, that it literally destroys people's brains.
Yes, and the other point that I got out of this documentary, Raised on Porn, was that both the men who gave their testimonies, who were raised watching pornography since they were very young, I think like 8, 10 years old, 12, they said they did not know how to relate to a woman.
Yes.
So they were kind of socially awkward people?
They did not know. They said how to approach a woman, how to have meaningful conversation with her, how to really have a relationship with her. The one guy gives his testimony just saying the whole time he's just thinking, okay, when am I going to do this sexual thing with her? When am I going to do that sexual thing with her? It's not in his mind at all to be giving her meaningful conversation, non-sexual, physical touch and affection, meeting her emotional needs. It's just nowhere in his mind.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. It's this is just kind of ties in with the issue of masturbation, which kind of goes together really with this, because you cannot really separate the two, where people do what they call solo sex, where everything is by themselves. You're not really involving another person. You're not giving to another person. It's all just about what can I get out of it, and you're doing it by yourself. Instead of being a giving thing, it now becomes just how to self-gratify and do things by yourself. And so 99% of all pornography involves masturbation.
So is that the issue of masturbation? And we were talking about masturbation, like you said, solo sex, not if you are having sex with your partner, married, and you do it to your partner. But is that the issue of masturbation, that you are selfish in that sense and are not ministering to your spouse?
Well, you're not ministering to your spouse because you only do things for selfish reasons, and you only do what is self-gratifying to you. This is not a mutual thing that happens between two consenting married people in a marriage relationship. And so, and again, with masturbation, it has a high potential for being addictive, okay? Because people will do it once a week, and then they do it every day. And I've interviewed and talked with people and have had patients who have been addicted to pornography and masturbations, where they will masturbate, 3-5 times per day.
Wow.
Okay, because they just cannot get enough. Because again, it's the same principle of this downregulation of receptors in their brain, where they have to have a more and a more and a more of a stimulus to get the same, and they just never feel satisfied. Because it's not real. It's not a real woman.
Well, because when a man makes love to his wife,
yes,
there are powerful hormones that are released, like oxytocin. There's a bonding hormone. That's the same hormone that is released when a woman gives birth to a baby, to bond her to a baby. That is a hormone that is released in a man's brain when he has an orgasm with his wife. It's a much more powerful experience. When he is masturbating himself with pornography, those hormones are not released. It is not nearly as satisfying, and therefore he has this compulsion to keep trying to repeat it with something maybe a little more stimulating in the pornography. But really what he needs is the 5-dimensional sex, not 1-dimensional sex. The 5-dimensional is to be physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, and spiritually bonded with another human being on an exclusive level where you unequivocally give yourselves heart and soul and your emotions, your spiritually you are bonded, and then you give each other physically to each other unconditionally forever. Nothing can come close to a sexual experience like that.
No.
So someone who might be listening right now might be convicted that they need to stop, or have been convicted for some time but feel stuck. They might be like, look, this is really hard to stop. And it could be a man or a woman. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for how someone like that can overcome their addiction?
Yes, I mean, this is a true addiction, and I think people need to realize that this is powerful, and to come off these things and to gain the victory over this is many times more difficult than quitting smoking or quitting alcohol or drugs. And so the first step of realizing that I'm stuck, I have a problem, and I need help is 50% of the war already won right there. And so what we would recommend is people, go and see a counselor, go and see your pastor, go and see a Christian counselor, and seek help and let somebody walk you through the steps to gain the victory over this. Just like you would do with any other addiction, there has to be a period of withdrawal from that, just like you go to detox, of coming off drugs and coming off, cigarettes. You've got to detox off that, and the detox is a very physical, medical condition where people have physical symptoms. And yes, it's tough, and sometimes people need some medical help to be able to come off those kind of things. And the same thing needs to happen with pornography and masturbation addictions. People need to withdraw from that. They have to detox. And there are programs and things, that you can do. There's a 90-day PMO where people will no pornography, no masturbation, and no orgasm for 90 days, where somebody will totally withdraw. And this can reset all those bad chemicals and receptors and things in your brain so that it can bring you to a place where you can actually get back to enjoying the things the way God has made it initially to be.
And I just want to say here that if you are able to, the Nedley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Residential Program helps people that suffer from pornography addictions. Yes. And they will do hydrotherapy morning and evening. They'll put you on a high nutritious diet. They make sure that you get a lot of exercise every day. They give you a lot of education. You will have morning and evening devotions. You'll have a counselor that can walk you through that addiction. You'll have a spiritual counselor, and really a program director that will take you by the hand and walk you through this program.
It's a comprehensive program.
A very comprehensive program. Plus, you'll be under the medical supervision of Dr. Neil Nedley, and we would highly recommend that program. But even so, if you're unable to go to that program, you might be able to find the Nedley community-based depression and anxiety recovery program, which is once a week a small group, and it is also a physician lecture, which is frequently on video. And then also to look on the Focus on the Family website for a good Christian counselor that can support you, that can walk you through, and also give you other resources. And I also want to recommend the Sex Addicts Anonymous, the 12-step program, the Sex Addicts Anonymous. I have attended some of the Narcotics Anonymous and the Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon.
For your training, we should say.
Meetings, yes, as part of my training as a counselor. And it's high-quality people that help you even in a moment of temptation if you're going to go online and log into a Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting.
So boy meets girl, they enter in a relationship. Like you said, I think it was Dr. Derek who said this, that men are like microwaves, women are like ovens. For women, it might be a couple of months until that sexual attraction starts appearing. For men, it might be sooner. How do you deal with that? Men might have it more consistently. I know women, I think from what I understand is that when women go through their ovulation, that's when the sex drive is higher. How do people who are not married deal with a sex drive and honor God and not doing things that are inappropriate before marriage?
I think when you enter into a relationship like that, like I think Elma mentioned a little bit earlier on the 12 steps that Dr. James Dobson mentions, that you need to, particularly with your physical relationship, you need to set specific boundaries and the pace at which you want this relationship to go. If you're just going to let it go, the research shows, I can't remember the exact...
150 hours.
150 hours for committed Christian couples on the average in the evangelical world before they end up in bed together. So that's not a long time. And so these are Christian people. So now, can you imagine people that are not Christians, if they don't put any boundaries on these kind of things? That's why people end up in bed and having sex very, very quickly. So you have to deliberately set boundaries as to how fast you're going to pace your relationship physically, and put those rules and boundaries in place as you grow spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Because the more time you spend with that person, obviously, the more you're going to grow physically closer, and you're going to have more desires, and you want to move further in your physical relationship. And so unless you pace that in the correct way, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And so that's what I would recommend.
So in the Song of Solomon, there's a conference called the Song of Solomon Conference, which is a literal, it was done by Pastor Tommy Nelson, who wrote a literal commentary on the book, The Song of Solomon. And in that book, it's a beautiful picture of God's ideal, how Solomon met this beautiful girl that was a shepherdess, and their romantic love life to when they got married and their honeymoon, and then conflict as well, and their walk through dating and courtship and
marriage.
Marriage and conflict as well. But something that comes out in the book, The Song of Solomon, is that they dated in the light. The courtship was in midday. It was in the light. They did not go and meet each other in places where they are alone together, where they are private, where they're in the dark, where things can happen that are not in accordance with God's boundaries that He's put around the marriage relationship. Because the truth is, until the day you marry someone, you have no guarantee that you guys are actually going to get married. And the heartbreak, if you have given yourself emotionally and mentally and socially to someone, and then have given yourself physically to someone, and then the relationship breaks up, it is indescribable pain. And the best thing to do is to obey God's boundaries, keep the sexual desires within the boundaries that He has given, and that is wait for the honeymoon night.
I would add to that even appropriate physical touch, like you mentioned earlier, a couple steps, to go slow with those, with the progression. Because, for example, kissing is a very intimate thing. Yes. And once you do that, you feel much more bonded to that person. Your relationship has just deepened significantly. And also, if you start doing that within like the first couple of weeks of dating, you're really rushing ahead. And once you start kissing, like that's the last step. Right. The next thing is anything that's within the marriage. And so if you do it early in your relationship, you might find yourself in trouble.
Well, and the research has shown that the average couple kisses before they have said, I love you, which to me is a tragedy. Is a kiss not an expression of love? Why would we be kissing someone that we do not yet feel that we love them or feel comfortable saying, I love you. You know, like we need to pace our relationship. Like we talked about those steps. Let's pace that relationship, keep the relationship in the light, have picnics, have walks outdoors, meet at a restaurant, meet in a public place, and try to avoid places where the two of you are in a private space completely alone. Like even if you drive somewhere in the car, make sure you don't sit alone in a parked car.
So, looking at, for example, let's say someone's in a relationship and they just notice in themselves, okay, today I have a very high sex drive. They tell their partner, look, we need to take some space. Like, let's each go our own way right now because I'm having these emotions or these feelings or these attractions and I want to be safe. But that person then goes home and might still have that high sex drive. How can they release that high sex drive appropriately? Not through masturbation or pornography, but is there any activities they can do? Can they find some distraction for themselves in a healthy way?
Well, go home, take a cold shower. That's, go for exercise, be outside in the open.
Go do some heavy weight training.
Do something where you can blow off some of those energy and steam and stuff in something physical and in something healthy. And get some fresh air, get some circulation going. All those kind of things will help with that. But you do need to remove yourself from that situation, obviously. And like you say, do take a breather, do take time away if that's what you experience. And but as you also know, it's not just urges that comes over you. Yes, there are days when hormones and things are different and higher and stuff. But it's also the more time you spend with that person, the more and the closer you are going to come to that person. And that's natural. God made it like that. You wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody that has no desire for you.
Right.
So
where there's no attraction.
There's no attraction, You want to have that desire. A woman wants to feel pursued. You don't want to beg the guy to come after you. You want to feel pursued, and so that's normal. God made it like that, but we just need to have control over how fast and where this leads to, and pace the relationship. And
we should also add that God created us humans with a sex drive. It's not sinful to desire that at some point. It's not sinful for the man, it's not sinful for the woman to feel that way, to think that way. Or I would say even if you're in a dating relationship and you notice that you're starting to have a sexual attraction for that person, I think it's a normal progression.
Oh, sure, it's normal.
Yeah, it's just how we deal with it at the moment. So I don't think, we should definitely not say like, oh, this is wrong. But like you guys said, we should keep it for marriage because that's how God designed it to be the most beautiful experience possible.
There's one verse that is repeated, I believe it's 4 times in the book Song of Solomon.
Yes.
And it says, I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, do not awaken love until the time is right. And I believe that is a caution that God is giving us. That, yes, it can be hard to wait, but you will be rewarded 100 times over.
If you wait.
Yes, when you have your honeymoon night and you guys have waited. And even if you haven't waited, there is secondary virginity. We can bring ourselves to Jesus today and ask Him for His forgiveness, ask Him for His grace, and He will make us virgins again because God is in the business of forgiving and restoring us. And to wait make a new commitment from today. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to do anything that's not in accordance with God's will until my honeymoon night. And I want to say here that in today's day and age, there's so much inappropriate things of married people between someone else that may be married or extramarital affairs. And that is devastating. It is destruction to your marriage. Or pornography in the marriage. That is adultery. It is biblical grounds for divorce. And to make a new commitment from today, I will be faithful to my spouse. And by God's grace, when any thoughts come into my mind, I will put them out and I will focus on my husband, on my wife. And I want to be faithful to God and I want to be faithful to my husband or my wife.
You mentioned Song of Solomon earlier. There's some verses in Song of Solomon that seem to be talking about oral sex. Here's Song of Solomon 2 verse 3 that says, "Like an apple tree among the trees of the woods, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." And then there's also chapter 4 verse 16, which says, "Awake, O north wind, and come, O south. Blow upon my garden, that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits." There seems to be quite a discussion among Christians as to whether oral sex is wrong. Now, from what I understand, anal sex is very clear in the Bible. It seems to say no. Song of Solomon is very poetic, and some people actually use these versions and say, look, it's wrong. And some other people use these versions and say, see, he was doing that, so it's fine. What is your guys' understanding of that?
When it comes to this topic, when it comes to the topic of sex, in general, there's a wide array of opinions and interpretations of the whole thing when it comes to just even sex in general. From ultra-conservatism, where we've had the Quakers who believed that, if you want to be part of the elect of the 144,000, these are people who've not defiled themselves with women, and it's taken literally. And these people didn't want to have sex, and they saw it as a necessary evil in this world. Therefore, God has said in the new heavens and in the new earth, there's not going to be any sex. So we're waiting to be transcended to a higher level. So this is the one extreme.
And I just want to add here that one of my favorite authors, Ellen White, says that is wrong. It is a wrong view to say very little or no sex in marriage.
Yeah, so you have a wide array of opinions when it comes to this, and I believe too that it's wrong. I think that sex is experienced with all our senses. When you read through the book of Song of Solomon, there's touch, there's taste, there's smell, there's feeling, and there's or touch. There's all the senses and visual. He looks at her and he desires her. So we touch people. We French kiss. Okay, why in the world do you want to French kiss somebody? Because you experience taste. All right, and then there's people that say the body has erotic zones where when you're touched in those areas, it feels different than in other areas. And so let's look at just from a logical point of view. Why would men want to kiss the wife's breasts? Breasts is for babies to drink milk and to feed them. That's the purpose. But is that the only purpose? Or did God have a different purpose for it as well? A purpose of a woman's femininity and pleasure during the sex act?
Quick question. Is that an area that is actually more sensitive for a woman to be touched? Is that so that God designed it for that reason
absolutely.
as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you look at the clitoral complex, the nervous system of the clitoral complex in the woman's vagina, there's no reason in procreation why that exists. It's only for pleasure. And so there's a wide array. So I believe when it comes to the area, and I think we agree on that, Alma, is that when there's mutual consent between people, you don't want to force something on somebody else that somebody feels uncomfortable with, right? But if it's not a health risk, and if it's something between the two of you that you feel that is what you want to do in your marriage, God tells us that He's given us sex to enjoy and to be intoxicated. And in the book of Song of Solomon, it says, drink deeply of the fountain of love that God has given us. He doesn't just tell us, I just want you to touch here and just taste here and just have a little bit of it here. He tells us, indulge yourself in this. And so when you read in the book, it says she puts perfume on herself to make her smell good. The guy puts oil on his body to make him smell good. And she puts perfume in her bedding and in her sheets and spices and things, all of these things. And sex is not done in a dark place where your eyes covered. He's beholding her and he's looking at what he sees. And he says what he sees is pleasurable and he desires her and she desires him. And so there's a lot of those kind of things that I think that are important, and so therefore we don't see that the Bible is against the practice of oral sex.
But I do think the point you made that it is by mutual consent.
Mutual consent.
What both people feel comfortable with. And that's one thing that I think is really important. And that is for people to talk about sex.
Yes.
The research has shown that most couples can't talk about sex. It's like it's like an untouchable
taboo.
Taboo. It's an untouchable subject. But it is very important for a couple starting on their honeymoon to have relaxed time and to ask the person, what do you feel comfortable with? What feels good to you? What do you enjoy? How do you envision, what looks like great making love to you? And read some books together. But I do believe that mutual consent, and it is also something that you grow into. I've read that it takes 20 years to unlock a woman sexually.
Yes.
So
Why is that?
I believe that it's because people don't talk about it. They don't know what really pleasures the other person. And because the people are not open in this aspect of the relationship, I believe that they are not honest with each other, that I want you to do this. This is pleasurable to me. This is what I desire. And they don't talk about these things.
Okay, well, we need to remember as well that we all have a deep desire in our hearts for intimacy, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, social, and physical intimacy. We all have that deep desire, men and women. And so now you get a couple that come together, they get married. They both are desiring this deep intimacy, but between them are obstacles. There are obstacles of their own baggage that they bring into the relationship, their own pride, their own selfishness, the way they were raised with dysfunction, and
wrongful references that they've experienced in the past,
To achieve the emotional, mental, spiritual, social intimacy takes a lot of hard work. And we see in the book Song of Solomon, conflict between this couple, where the man comes and he puts his hand in the door and he wants to come into her, and she says, I don't feel like putting my feet on the floor. I don't feel like getting my feet dirty. And I've taken my clothes off. I don't feel like getting up and putting it back on. And then he leaves. And then she goes out searching for him. So there's conflict between the two of them. We also see in that book how they handle their conflict by communication and forgiveness. And overcoming the obstacles between us, emotionally, mentally, socially, spiritually, that leads to that intimacy, that one flesh experience, that all has to do with our sexual intimacy as well. And it is by overcoming those obstacles and those barriers between the two of you that the woman's heart is unlocked and that she experiences this deep trust of this man. When you first get married, there's a feeling like, do I really trust you? Are you really in this thing for the long haul? Do you really mean everything that you have said? Are you really in for this thing forever?
And are you going to treat me with kindness when I show you my heart? What I'm really like inside. And so that takes time.
When you see my faults.
When you see my faults, who I really am. Because we all, and the illustration that Alma was using here actually comes from Pastor Chip Ingram in his marriage seminar that we've attended as well and listened to, which shows that we all are actually deeply insecure in our inner being. And we don't want to open up to other people, even our spouse, to really let them know, this is who I really am.
Because we all have faults.
We all have faults,
And we have the feeling, if that person was to see my faults, maybe they wouldn't love me anymore.
They wouldn't love me anymore.
Maybe they'd take off and leave, you know? So it's only when you've overcome those barriers to intimacy that the woman truly experiences this man's commitment is there for life. I can really trust him. He's in for the long haul. That is what really unlocks the woman sexually. And I believe that is what I've read. It takes 20 years to unlock a woman sexually. And most people, a lot of divorces happen long before 20 years.
Yeah, they give up
and
long
so
before.
they've given up long before the most amazing things are going to happen in their relationship.
Yes, that's true.
So let's say they are, happily married, and they communicate, and the couple says, okay, we both agree to want to do oral sex. Or it's possible, I think, that the woman says, yeah, you can do it to me, but I don't feel comfortable doing that to you, and that's where boundaries come in, and you can say no. But they might wonder, hygiene. And I can understand that because these are organs that we also use to urinate. Is it, Dr. Derek, hygienic to do this?
Actually, the dirtiest part on a person's body is actually your mouth.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And people kiss all the time when they're married.
People kiss all the time. We stick our fingers in our mouth. We put our food in there. So yes, but there are some considerations that we need to take into play, and so one needs to make sure. Just general hygiene all over. I mean, nobody wants to be intimate and make love with somebody if you haven't taken a shower, or there's bad odor, or you're sweaty, or you're dirty. Okay, you want to wash yourself, you want to wash your body, and you want to present. And when you read in the book Song of Solomon, she's washed, she's put perfume, she's put oil on her, she's put stuff in her bed, and all these kind of things. She's made preparations and she's ready. Okay, and I think we do the same thing whether we're going to do regular sex or whether we're going to do oral sex or whatever, people, or whether you're going to be kissed all over your body. It doesn't matter. You take a shower, you wash yourself, and you prepare yourself for that.
Right, and I think that is very important to, have that routine of having that, evening shower. Yeah. We just love to do that. Yeah.
Well, I think it brings us back to another one point that I just wanted to bring in, and you kind of mentioned this when you talked about, anal sex. I mean, there's people that feel that, mutual consent between people, yes, we can do that, and it's fine. But the thing is that we need to also realize that the anus and the rectum was not designed for intercourse and penetration.
So it was designed for things to come out.
Things to come out, not for things to go in. And so when you do those kind of things, as a physician, I have seen people who have done these things with, with very, detrimental effects. There's tears, there's bleeding, there's infections, there's a much higher risk of sexually transmitted diseases that takes place and things when people engage in these activities. And that's the reason why God, discourages those type of activities and things, and we should stay away from that. But on the other side, we have people, again, more ultra-conservative people, particularly Christians, who believe that, only intravaginal sex and orgasm is the only thing that's appropriate and should be performed. And that, I believe, is not right either. As a matter of fact, when you look at the research actually shows that only 30% of all women actually experience a true orgasm. What we see on pornography and what we see on movies and all these kind of things, most of these women, or maybe say most, almost all of them, fake it. But it's all fake. Why
is that they don't experience that?
Okay, and I think there's several reasons, because in the way that sex is performed and done, it's not done in a committed relationship, done according to God's way, so that prepares the woman to receive the guy, and she's ready to experience lovemaking in its fullness, and therefore they do not experience an orgasm.
I believe that sex that's outside of a committed relationship at the very least, but mostly, also sex outside of marriage, premarital sex, extramarital sex, there's no way that the man can get to know the woman and pleasure her.
Yeah, no. Absolutely.
And it takes learning, getting to know her, getting to know her needs, and that just does not take place outside of marriage. Or at least a very long committed relationship.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. And so that's sad when you look at that statistic, but an even more sadder statistic than that is that only less than 10% of women actually experience an intravaginal penetration orgasm.
So what's the difference? You mentioned orgasm earlier, and now you mentioned this one. What's the difference between the two?
Well, there's because a lot of women, the only way they experience an orgasm is with by manually or oral sex or in another way, and so it's not just one way. that women can experience an orgasm. And so therefore, and that's the reason why I believe that when you have intercourse or you are in the process of lovemaking, then it's a agreement, mutually agreement between two people as to what they want to do to pleasure each other. There's not a one prescribed prescription. This is the way it's done. I mean, there are even people that believe you can only have sex in the missionary position, and all other positions is of the devil, and that's wrong. I feel that, God has not given us a one prescription. Each person is made individually. They are different. We all experience things in a different way. And so it's between the husband and the wife in the privacy of their bedroom what they decide what they're going to do in their lovemaking that is pleasurable for the two of them. And that is as widely different between people as people are different from each other.
And between a newly married couple, it's a beautiful journey together.
Yes.
Of getting to know each other better, getting to know each other more deeply on an emotional, spiritual, mental, social, and physical level, and exploring each other's desires and what pleasures each other. It's a journey together, a beautiful journey.
Yeah, you grow in that. You become better at it the older you get. When I was younger, I heard the stories and I read the books, and people would say, magic explosive sex happens in your 60s. And I thought, oh, come on, this can't be true. I mean, I'm a young guy. I'm in my 30s. My sex drive is high. It couldn't get any better than what it is right now, right? And I honestly believe that until you get there. And you allow God to work in your life and you grow closer to God. You become more committed to Him. You become more committed to your wife. And then you begin to realize that God opens things. And like Alma was saying earlier, a woman's heart opens and she truly begins to give herself fully. And then you begin to realize, what on earth have I been missing? Am I not happy and glad that I stuck this through? Because how many times all couples go through times where you say to yourself, man, I want to get out of here. I have had enough of this. I don't want to do this no more.
This man has hurt me so much.
And this woman has hurt me so much.
Give me my stuff. I'm out
of here. Yeah. But, and then you work through your conflict and you work through those things. And then God says, I reward you because you stick with it and you work out your problems and your conflict, and I will make you become closer and closer and closer. And that's, I believe, the reason why God is used marriage as a way for Him to describe to us the relationship that He wants with us. Okay? He uses marriage. And the word that God uses that in John 17 verse 3, where it says, and this is eternal life, that you will know me. The word there is the same word that is used in Genesis, where it talks about Adam knew Eve and she bore him a son. So that's talking about the intimate sexual relationship.
I've never even read that verse like that before. Like you said, I always thought Adam knew Eve. Okay, they had sex. But it's like, no, they knew each other. They had an emotional bond that it was so deep that they knew the depths of each other's hearts.
Right. And that's much more than a one-dimensional physical thrill.
Yes.
Just having an ejaculation.
A one-night stand.
Right. Yeah. This is an emotional, mental, physical, social oneness. Yeah. Spiritual, one flesh union. And it is 5-dimensional sex, which is indescribable compared to just a one-dimensional.
So how can then a married couple, if they've been married for a while, sex is not new to them anymore, keep it alive, interesting, even passionate, when they've been married for a while? Because for some people it might become mundane.
Right, and that is true, that anything that you're not going to put time and effort and work into is going to become mundane. And therefore, it is important for a married couple to have that date night every week. And I am a firm believer. My husband and I, we've always joked, by God's grace, we've always been faithful to each other for our 38 years. We've been married. Next year, we'll be married 40 years. But we've always been firm believers that we want to have affairs with each other.
Going on dates.
Because of that research that I encountered when I was just, doing my bachelor's in psychology. And we committed that we want to have affairs with each other and that we're willing to spend time, money, to make special events, to make romantic times together, schedule fun times. And I believe like scheduling a weekend away together once every 3 months or so, even a week honeymoon. Why only have one honeymoon in your lifetime? We believe that having a week away together is divorce insurance. You have health insurance, you have house insurance, you have car insurance. Why not insure your marriage? Put the money aside and count it as divorce insurance, because it's when you go away for that week alone together. That's when you realize how important your relationship really is, your priorities. You realize what's most important and how unimportant so many of the other things that distract us and occupy our time, and what a high priority we need to give our marriage. And we fall in love with each other all over again. And so anyway, we've just been strong believers in that.
Yeah, I just want to say something with that. And, you know, most married couples, especially when they have children, they use that as an excuse that they don't have time to do these things. You know, but we've had 4 kids, and our kids were pretty close together. I had to go to medical school first before we could start having children. So we were married for 7 years before we had children. And so we wanted 4 kids. So our kids are all close together. So we had kids, when all our kids were born, we had 4 kids, 5 and under. All right. And so it was a busy time. But my wife made a priority with this. And she started at our church a babysitting co-op, where we would exchange babysitting with other young married couples so that they can have an evening a week that they can go away.
We exchanged, we had bingo chips.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, everyone who joins the co-op, you get a certain number of bingo chips, and each one represents an hour of babysitting time, and then you pay each other with bingo chips. And if you're out of bingo chips, you have to babysit to get more so that you can...
Nice.
And so that would give us the time once a week to go out, and we would dress up. We would put on my best clothes. We would put on a perfume and the cologne, and we would make a special. And one week she would make the date, and I don't know where we're going. And one week I would make the date, and she doesn't know where we're going. And we would go special places to eat or do special things, just so that we can have that time together. And I think if everybody does that, I think our marriages and the sex lives within marriage will be way, way better than what it is right now. Because actually, you know what? When you look at the statistics says, you know, that amongst conservative evangelical Christian couples, on the average, their sex lives is actually not very good.
Why is that?
I think, and the reason is because people don't take and make the time, like Alma was saying here. They've let the small little things go, the dates, the special courtesies, the special time, the special things that they used to do when they were dating. They don't do it anymore because now they're too busy with the kids, with all other stuff. And many of those things are good things, but they don't do those things. And then their love life dies. And when your love life and your sex life dies, your marriage is just hanging by a thread.
You see, there's 2 aspects to having a great marriage. The one is your commitment, and the other is the feeling of love.
Yes.
A lot of people have a strong commitment in their marriage, but the feeling of love, that spark that they had when they were dating and when they first got married, that made magic between them, it's gone. It disappeared. And it takes work to keep that feeling of love. And yet, that feeling of love and the feeling of being in love can be maintained throughout your marriage. Yes. But it takes work. It takes setting time aside, taking thought for romantic connection between the two of you, sending those texts, sending those,
the flowers.
Yeah,
yes.
Flowers and romantic messages during the day.
Little notes.
It's like if you're a golfer and you want to become a better golfer. You join a club, you go and do the driving range and you practice. You go to the putting greens and you practice your putting, and you go out once a week and you play your 18 holes of golf, and you buy books and you buy videos and things that teaches you your swing, and you go do all those things. If you want to be a good lover, you want to be a good husband, and not just a father and a church man. Yes, those things are important. But if I want to be a good lover to my wife, I better take some books and put some money in and buy some things and find out what I need to do to be a good lover. And the same thing with a wife.
Yeah, it's like I got into rock climbing recently, a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
and I'm obsessed with it. And I'm spending, like, I'm literally at work, and I'm thinking about climbing. And I'm talking to my colleague who's sitting across from me, who's been climbing for so many years. I'm like, hey, so I did this climb, and like, this is what I did, and this is my whole, and I couldn't get it. What do I do? Or like, I video myself climbing, and I analyze this video over and over and over again to figure out, how can I move my body differently? You know, how do I grip this hold? Do I do something else to figure it out? And I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos or going to climbing gym to practice those things, asking somebody else. Like, I was with Lisa Marie today, who is you guys' daughter. We were both climbing, and we're both like watching each other, figuring this out to see, how can we get to the top? And then how can we, what's called ascend, like how can you ascend this climb? And I think about that in relationships, in dating, in marriage. It's the same thing. And sometimes in dating, this is maybe a bit more, people more invested, but like you said, like, I don't think you ever stop learning. And I think you have to keep learning about the other person and keep investing. Because if we invest that much time in something that is an object, a sport, whatever, why not the love of our lives?
How much more the love of our lives? Absolutely.
Well, you know, they say that nothing really worthwhile in life comes without hard work. And we believe that about our marriage, that sometimes you have to put your feelings aside and go and sit down and talk to someone when your feelings are hurt and you don't feel like it. And sometimes you need to put your hand on your spouse's hand and or just put your arm around them and love them even when your feelings are hurt, and then take time to talk it out. And yes, there is an aspect to marriage of hard work. And that is when there are hurt feelings, when there's misunderstandings between us, taking that time to communicate, to talk, and to resolve conflict. Something that we made a commitment that we will not go to bed with anger between us.
And I've even heard you guys say that if at one time you guys were on your way to church, I think you told me that, Miss Elma, and that you turned around to solve the conflict before you wouldn't go to church unless it was solved.
Right, because there's scripture, I believe it's in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus said, if your brother has something against you, leave your gift at the altar. First go home and be reconciled to your brother. And that, I believe, applies to us in marriage. Is your spouse not also a brother or sister in Christ? And how can we go to church? It's been a couple of times in our 38 years that we've driven to church. We arrive at church, we look at each other and we go, you know what? We're not on speaking terms. How can we go into church and say, hello, happy Sabbath, or whatever, you know, and be so friendly to everybody there, whereas we're not on speaking terms with each other? That we said, you know what, we need to go back home. We need to go sort out this conflict. And sometimes it takes 3 hours to work through, process that conflict, come on the other side of it, and then watch a sermon together and have a lunch together. But then there's peace between us. And I believe that God has given us one day a week that He has set aside, that we can have time for the most significant relationships in our life. And sort out those conflicts, resolve those differences, and have love and peace between the two of you.
Okay, so bit of a side question, but also still going to the connecting with the spouse, and what if your marriage is not good? Is it appropriate for married couples to dress up a certain way? I'm thinking like for the woman maybe particular lingerie, or sometimes it goes even into like special outfits, leather suits, that kind of stuff. Is that appropriate as Christians?
Well, firstly, I want to say that mutual consent is very important in a marriage. However, we always need to keep in mind God's principles and what God has commanded us. And dressing up in a sexy outfit, or wearing something special, something new, or something that your husband likes or has picked out, I don't have any problems like that. Or even for the husband to wear some special, special underwear or something really nice, or some. It brings spice, and it's a fun thing in a marriage. However, there's so much perversion going on We don't believe that anything that is humiliating, that is violent, forceful, or rough is in accordance with Scripture, or that it is an act of love. And that's why God gave us the book, the Song of Solomon, to show us this beautiful romance, the tenderness, the love, how the man is talking to his spouse and complimenting like every aspect of her, and how the wife compliments her husband, all the beautiful things that they say to each other, the tenderness and the love between them. So like,
passion and tenderness can go together.
right.
And that's what comes out in the book of Song of Solomon.
But nothing that is a perversion.
Perversion.
Or that is humiliating, or, we need to be very, very careful that we are within God's plan. And that's why the Song of Solomon, that book, I believe, it has a spiritual application, it has a symbolic application, but also has a literal application to a couple that's in love and that gets married and is on honeymoon, and that we can see what God's ideal is in marriage.
So before we wrap up, because we've talked a lot about all kinds of questions regarding sex within marriage and outside of marriage even, and I'd love to know what is the purpose of sex, but I'd like to go back to the hygiene part. Specifically, does the Bible say anything about women when they're on their periods? Is that something that is inappropriate? Or because I understand that, I can't imagine it being comfortable because a woman is usually very sore. But I read online that some women say it's amazing and it actually releases the dopamine, makes them physically feel better. Does the Bible say anything about that?
There are, if you read in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy and some of those places where there were some health laws that Moses specifically mentions that during the menstrual flow of a woman that there shouldn't be any sexual intercourse. And I think there are some health risks involved with that. There's a higher risk of sexually transmitted diseases, and also just regular bacterial vaginosis, which is just regular infections. Also, you having blood and things that are down there, and during intercourse, you can get urinary tract infections that can spread up not just to the bladder, but also to the kidneys higher, and so you can get those type of things. There's also a higher risk for the development of endometriosis when these kind of things, specifically if there's trauma that takes place during intercourse. And so due to the nature of sex, there's always possibilities of minor trauma that can take place. So those are all health risks, and so I don't think that it is advisable for people to have intercourse during a woman's menstrual flow. Now, there's lots of people that claim all kinds of stuff, that they will experience better this and better this when they have sex in specific times. Or there's also people that say, hey, I get a better sex when I have sex with two women, and all these kind of things. So obviously we need to take these things with a pinch of salt that people post and say. They don't always speak the truth. They just say whatever they want to because they want to find an excuse for what they're doing.
And we live in a world right now of
anything goes.
Everything goes. And when you
perversion.
And when you get movies like 50 Shades of Grey and things like that are, absolutely promoting and glorifying perversion, then we have reached a very sad point, I would say, in our society.
So the final question, it all comes down to this. Like I said before, we've talked about all kinds of things, which I think I'm really glad we did this, because so many people in the Christian world feel a sense of shame. They feel that they can't talk about this, they can't ask questions, and I think it's healthy to have someone who is happily married, like you guys, to have an open conversation with, like, what about this? What about this? Because I think that people need to be allowed to ask questions and know and not feel ashamed. But so we talked a lot about a lot of things. Now, in the Bible, in how God created man and woman, what is the purpose of sex within marriage?
I think there isn't just one purpose. I think there's multiple purposes. God says, go and be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. So sex is certainly for procreation. This is God's way and means. God could have said, spit in the bowl, both of you together, and a baby is born. He could have done that. But he used the sex act as a means of procreation. Now, so that's certainly the one reason, okay, in order to multiply and to bring forth offspring in your image. And God is a God that always creates. He's continuing creating, and because that is the essence of love. Love creates new things. I mean, God, after he made one flower, he could have stopped, but he made 1,000,000 flowers, different ones. He made 1,000,000 trees, all different from each other. Even in the human race, he could have made one person, but then he made black ones and all kinds of colored ones and short ones and fat ones and tall ones and thin ones, and everybody's different. And so, because God is a God of variety, and so that's the one reason. The other reason I think is a reason is bonding. Okay, I think God made the sex act. When you read in the Scripture, a man would, after he's married, after his wedding, he would consummate the wedding by going in and having intercourse with his wife. Now she becomes his, and it's almost a signing or a final step in a covenant where now she belongs to him. And so I think that's a reason. There's bonding that takes place, and we talked about different hormones that are being released that made that bonding more powerful. And so certainly bonding is another reason. But there are also many, many things. Humans are the only animals that really have pleasure involved in sex, where there's certain aspects and certain nerve complexes and things that's purely there only for pleasure. So God made it for pleasure, for something that a husband and wife can do together and enjoy. And I think that's the three reasons and the three purposes of sex: for procreation, for bonding and oneness and union, and for pleasure. God has created it for that, and that's the reason why he also uses the marriage metaphor as an explanation of our relationship with him. He is the bridegroom. We are the bride. The church is his bride. And we're going to this marriage supper of the Lamb. And that's going to be an incredible, pleasurable thing.
Not sexually pleasurable, but
not sexually pleasurable,
yeah.
But in that sense, if you think sex is the most pleasure you can experience on this earth, God says even more than that is going to be the reunion of him and his church. And so that's how God uses this, because that's the best way that we can understand it. That's why God gives it to us in that way.
Well, and also it's also a metaphor of the God, the Father, God, the Son, God, the Holy Spirit are three in one.
Three in one.
And the same way in the marriage, the two shall be one flesh.
Yeah.
One flesh union. And so when a man looks after his wife, he's actually taking care of himself, is what the Bible says.
I am Danique Tersmet, and you are listening to the Little Light Studios podcast. If you like our show, make sure to leave us a comment and a 5-star review. Also, make sure to check out our YouTube show, Video Bible Study, in which we seek to answer a Bible question in 5 minutes or less. And don't forget to give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. We would love to hear from you.